Michael Saylor's company, Strategy, now holds 500,000 Bitcoin, 500,000 Bitcoin. But there's mounting evidence that they don't hold a single Bitcoin themselves, instead leaving them in custodians like Coinbase. And it's not just Michael Saylor. It's governments around the world opting to leave their coins with custodians instead of having the ability to verify it and access it themselves in self-custody. Michael Saylor's actually even gone on the record to say how he doesn't think this is a big deal. But as someone who's been in the space for 12 years, I can tell you, not your keys, not your coins. And when you have Bitcoin with a custodian outside of your control, it's often a ticking time bomb. So today I want to explore what is the best and the worst case scenario for Michael Saylor's 500,000 Bitcoin stockpile. Let's dive into it. So Michael Saylor's been buying Bitcoin like a complete savage for about 2-3 years now, but we've recently seen his language hinge. And in this specific interview that I want to run through, we've actually seen him take a pretty dramatic turn to the point where people have been calling to slay your heroes. I've seen some tweets. The class of 21 has to slay your hero, Saylor. So let's dive into the interview.
If there is more Bitcoins held with these third-party custodians, what risk does that pose, having greater supply held by fewer large institutions? Does that increase the risk of seizure and confiscation like we've seen with gold? And is that not exactly what Bitcoiners don't want to happen?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think that when the Bitcoin is held by a bunch of crypto anarchists who aren't regulated entities, who don't acknowledge government or don't acknowledge taxes or don't acknowledge reporting requirements, that increases the risk of seizure.
I think it increases the risk of governments wanting to seize, but I think he's blatantly wrong here. It actually decreases the risk of seizure because it's in the hand of a crypto anarchist who doesn't recognize government. Like, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth here. The other thing that I think is interesting is if you flip that statement around, flip it on its head, what he's saying is it's easier for a government to change the rules and tax you when the coins are in the hands of a custodian.
If you consider the Great Depression, I mean, people thought that their gold was safe in banks until the Executive Order of 1933. So we're not entirely safe. I mean, I know that's kind of a wild thing to suggest may happen again, but history does repeat itself. So people's Bitcoin wouldn't be entirely safe. It's
people say that, but mostly it's paranoid crypto anarchists that say that. Okay? Because it's a myth and a trope that goes on over and over again. But first of all, he didn't really seize the gold. People voluntarily turned in the gold. They didn't go and kick in everybody's door, arrest them, shoot them, and take their gold. That never happened.
I don't see how it's a myth and a trope. Less than 100 years ago, we had people who, under the threat of violence and theft, were handing their gold over. This is not a voluntary seizure, by the way. This was an involuntary seizure. This was people who were threatened with violence, jail time, and fines if they didn't hand over their gold. I actually keep this right behind me. You guys can see Executive Order 6102. Let me read this. Criminal penalties for violation of Executive Order, $10,000 fines or 10 years imprisonment, or both, as provided in Section 9 of the order. I really hate this take. I think Saylor's done a lot of good things for Bitcoin and bringing it onto the map, but this is one of the stupidest things that I have ever heard him say. And frankly, it should be offensive to anyone that has a brain in their head that a 6102 attack cannot happen to Bitcoiners in the future.
Is the United States on the Bitcoin standard?
Maybe we will be soon.
But the point really is we're not. Right? It's totally not a reasonable comparison.
I think that's a big reach, personally. I think that, everyone's pushing to move the USA towards a Bitcoin standard. I personally have been a little bit on the fence. I think it's obviously, positive hearing politicians talking about Bitcoin in a positive light for once. But the US government actually holding and controlling a sizable chunk of Bitcoin, hard to say if that's good long term.
People have these inflammatory tropes or inflammatory memes that they use. And it's like, I say that because I want you to give me your money. Okay? Like, if you don't trust the bank, then you'll buy my hardware wallet. If you don't trust this government, you'll move to my country and you'll buy a passport from me. That's the kind of fear-mongering to get you to give me your money, right? And I use it to sell you a gun, to sell you a hardware wallet, to sell you an account, to sell you a financial advisor, to sell you an insurance policy, to sell you a, fill in the blank.
I don't know. I don't honestly see the community around self-custody is so much greater than just simply the hardware wallet providers. There are like 10 hardware providers that actually have prominence that benefit from talking about self-custody. Is there only 10 people talking about self-custody? I mean, even expanding it, look at like Bitcoin Well, the Bitcoin platform that I am the founder and CEO. We are a non-custodial Bitcoin platform. We force you to take your Bitcoin into your personal Bitcoin wallet on each and every transaction. We could run a custodial platform. We could keep your coins and allow others to have access to your coins, but we don't. But I'm not sure that my emphasis on self-custody is this massive, enabler of my business. In fact, I think that self-custody is the single greatest barrier to our business. That is the biggest hurdle that our customers have to overcome in order to transact and use Bitcoin well. But we do it because it's the right thing to do, because we are principled, because we understand that when you give your Bitcoin to somebody else, they will steal it 99 times out of 100, and probably on a long enough time frame, 100 times out of 100, your Bitcoin will be stolen if you do not own it or control it. So before we dive into the comments and kind of get a good discussion going on whether or not Saylor is if he's been captured or what's going on with this seemingly sudden change away from like self-custody is only for crypto anarchists and towards, you should leave your coins in custody, and how the centralization of the asset of Bitcoin is actually a positive. I want to just really emphasize what the dangers of leaving your coins in a custodian are. Because I think the biggest risk and the biggest outsized risk is the honeypot effect that is created. The way the blockchain works is the institutional grade security that previously was only afforded to these institutions is built into the blockchain, which means accessible. You, me, my mom, my grandma, we all have, there's complete decentralized access to institutional grade crypto/Bitcoin security. And if you look back to earlier times, it actually made sense to leave your gold with a custodian because they could afford lasers and big safes. They could be bomb proof. It made sense to take it out of the nabob coffee can under your bed and into what would be called institutional grade security. But here, the institutional grade security is actually in the protocol, which means you and I have the same institutional grade security as a Coinbase or as a Bybit or as any other custodian on the planet. They can probably have more rules, they can have more policies, but they also have more people to kind of combat that. So there's this weird benefit analysis that has to be done. Is it actually safer to hold your keys to someone else? Well, they won't lose it. Sure. If you're worried about losing something that much and your response is someone else won't lose it, then maybe you should leave your Bitcoin with a custodian. But I would really challenge you as a human being to just be like, well, I'm going to have some personal accountability here. I can probably keep 12 words safe. The key to Bitcoin was to bring personal accountability and personal generational wealth into the world. It wasn't so that everyone could get rich quickly, sell it when it goes up, and then give away all the freedom and all the power to somebody else. So with that, first things first, tell me if you agree, tell me what I missed, tell me if you disagree, and let's dive into the comments. We have one comment here. Without self-custody, Bitcoin has very little purpose. Totally agree. Besides selling it for more fiat or pumping a stock price, why would we use proof of work? He seems to be regurgitating old ideas a lot lately. He's exploring yield. I think he's going to have a hard time. No, I have a different take. I think he's going to have a very easy time because it seems like this hard pivot came as his price, as his fiatness got higher and higher and higher. Fiat bad, Bitcoin good, self-custody Bitcoin best. This is the narrative. However, we've got fiat bad, Bitcoin good. We've got this weird pivot into almost fiatizing Bitcoin. Banana Stan says, have no doubt that Saylor has a cold storage lifeline bigger than all of us. He's trying to accelerate the conduit to TradFi, so needs to speak the language they are comfortable with. But he's lying. This is just the wrong language. What's the point of getting someone into Bitcoin if they think that Bitcoin is about centralizing assets, giving the elite the control of those assets, and putting more power into the hands of government? Why do we want that person in the Bitcoin? Why do we want that person contributing to Bitcoin, bringing that ideology and those values into Bitcoin? Obviously, Bitcoin is for everyone. You can do with it what you will. And tell me, what do you think? Why would we want people who don't care about the freedom that Bitcoin provides? One day he'll get the nickname Honeypot Mike. This is what I was talking about. All those coins sitting in Coinbase, they are one bad signature away from being sold. That's crazy. Your coins, like if you're an attacker and you had to choose to do mountains and mountains and mountains of work to social engineer a pile of people, are you going to choose the guy that holds less than 1 Bitcoin in cold storage, or the company that publicly tells you how much Bitcoin they have in cold storage? And probably with a little bit of investigation, you can see who holds the keys and how much you can get. Like, I don't think with less than a couple years of work, you could probably actually even infiltrate that business. Here he says there is actually a very good reason for a Bitcoin-backed bank to exist, issuing their own digital cash currency redeemable for Bitcoins. Bitcoin itself cannot scale to have every single financial transaction in the world to broadcast to everyone and included in the blockchain. There needs to be a second level of payment systems, which is lighter weight and more efficient. Likewise, the time needed for Bitcoin transactions to finalize will be impractical for medium to large vehicle purchases. I don't know about that. I think if you're buying a house, 10 minutes for a block to confirm feels like a reasonable amount of time. Right now, we have like 30-day escrow periods. Shrinking that to 10 minutes feels like a pretty good, reasonable leap forward. I also think that, Hal, he wrote this long before Lightning Network. Lightning Network has been around, and also other federational networks have popped up, like the Liquid Network, both kind of creating his vision here. That is Lightning and Liquid. Both of those, though, come with their own risks, right? Liquid, basically a federation, basically just a larger custodian with a little bit more security for the individual, but frankly, a complete disconnect from pure control. Lightning Network, very technical, very difficult to set up, although it's getting easier. I've been running my own node with my own Lightning Network channels. I've been spending from it for about 2 years now. Not that hard. And so, but it's interesting to see Hal kind of, or maybe even Saylor, borrowing from this Hal concept from 15 years ago. Personally, I think that the Bitcoin network has evolved so much, the community has evolved and innovated so much that we'll never know, obviously, but it'd be interesting to say, what would Hal say today? And then lastly, let's have some fun. One of my uncles was ostensibly an executive at a major oil company, only he wasn't. It was actually his cover as an agent for the CIA. If your model of reality doesn't include intelligence agents in major industry and media organizations, you're probably missing something big. And then this person highlights that the MicroStrategy headquarters is 11 minutes away from the CIA. Look, there is a possibility, I will say, where we have Trump saying he wants 1 million coins, or saying he wants 250, but the kind of, the popular belief number to be 1 million. We have Michael Saylor stacking now 500K. There is a non-zero chance that Michael Saylor is building the US reserve coins. There is a non-zero chance there will be a 6102 type event where Trump and the US government decides that Michael Saylor, MicroStrategys or strategy holds too much Bitcoin, and instead they're going to take it. And they'll pay out the bonds, they'll pay out the holders. All you shareholders, you'll make out like a bandit. But there is a non-zero chance that 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, that will have been a negative thing for Bitcoin, for MicroStrategys holders, for strategy itself, for Saylor himself. Centralizing assets, while a high time preference benefit, could, in my opinion, this is the largest risk to deleting the prospect of what Bitcoin can be, or at best, slows it down. Because when you centralize something good, corruption happens. We all know that absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you have the most important asset on planet Earth, centralized and in the control of a small number of individuals, and I don't care what you say, right? It's probably not one individual, but it's probably less than 100. In fact, it's probably less than 15. And when you think about 15 people having access to billions and billions of dollars in traceable but pseudo-anonymous generational wealth, it would reason to say, in my opinion, that we should at least be asking the question, is self-custody too difficult? What can you and I do today to ring the alarm, to actually encourage people who have this belief that self-custody is too hard? How can we encourage them? And how can we show them how important self-custody is? Because this, I think, is the biggest risk to Bitcoin on the highest level, on the biggest scale, is who owns the asset. I'm not talking about whose name is on title, because there is no title. I'm talking about who has the private key. So if you like this, if you like these thought exercises, comment below. Tell me, what do you think? Is self-custody too hard? Do you self-custody? Nice try, Fed. Understanding that, we have to be diligent. We have to be careful. There are risks to self-custody. I just think those risks and those downsides are dramatically outweighed by the benefits and the power and the freedom and the sovereignty that self-custody affords you. So that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more like this. And also comment below, what should we dive into? How do we properly educate the masses on future-proofing yourself?